The beach house! I knew Daddy would take care of me. That's what my sister-in-law screamed when she opened her envelope. Then my father-in-law looked at me with this little smirk on his face and said, "And you get the old motel off Route 9. At least one daughter got the real assets." My husband laughed. His whole family laughed, every single one of them. They were all laughing at me like I'd just been handed a bag of trash at Christmas. They had no idea what they'd just given me. My name is Corinne. I'm 34 years old. I grew up in a tiny rural town where my dad fixed cars for a living and my mom served lunch trays at the elementary school. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. We were the kind of family that reused aluminum foil and thought eating out meant getting a burger from the gas station. I married into the Bellingham family when I was 25. Derek was charming back then. He opened doors for me. He told me I was smart. He made me feel like I mattered. But after the wedding, after the kids came, he changed. Or maybe he just stopped pretending. He fell right back in line with his family, and suddenly, I was the outsider again, the quiet one. The one who cleared the plates after dinner while everyone else talked. The one nobody asked for an opinion. The Bellinghams owned a small chain of dry cleaning stores. Nothing huge, but enough to make them feel important. And they made sure I knew my place. Their daughter, Vanessa, was the one they always praised. She got the vacations. She got the new car at 21. She got the down payment on her condo. I got leftovers and side-eye. I worked part-time as a bookkeeper for a local construction company. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that impressed anyone at the Bellingham dinner table. But I wasn't rich or glamorous. I didn't have a degree from a fancy school. But I had something none of them expected. I knew how to read numbers. And numbers don't lie. If you've ever sat at a table surrounded by people who looked right through you, like your worth didn't even register, hit that subscribe button. I want to hear your story in the comments. You're not invisible, and neither was I. Click hype or like. Let's go. Let me take you back to that dinner. Gerald Bellingham was 68 and retiring. He sat at the head of his mahogany dining table with 3 envelopes laid out in front of him like he was hosting some kind of game show. He said he was dividing up the family properties early to avoid estate taxes. That was how he framed it. Smart financial planning. But really, it was a performance. Gerald loved an audience. He had 3 properties. The beach house on the coast, beautiful, prime real estate, worth a fortune. A duplex in the city that brought in steady rental income every month. And then there was the old motel on Route 9. 14 rooms. Hadn't been operational in 6 years. The roof leaked. The parking lot was cracked down the middle. The sign out front was hanging by one bolt, swinging in the wind like it was begging someone to put it out of its misery. Gerald gave the beach house to Vanessa. She squealed like she'd won the lottery. He gave the duplex to Derek, but he made it very clear that it stayed in the Bellingham name. Not mine, never mine. Then he slid the last envelope across the table to me. "Consider it a gift, Corinne," he said. "Maybe you can finally learn to manage something on your own. Lord knows you haven't managed much else." Vanessa nearly choked on her wine laughing. "Maybe she can turn it into a bed and breakfast," she said. "She's good at making beds, right?" The whole table laughed. I looked at Derek, my husband, the man who promised to stand beside me. He shrugged. "Dad's being generous. Just say thank you." So I did. I looked Gerald in the eye and said, "Thank you, Gerald." My voice was steady, my hands were not. They were shaking under the table, but nobody noticed. Nobody ever noticed anything about me. The table moved on to dessert. They talked about Vanessa's renovation plans for the beach house. They talked about Derek's role in expanding the dry cleaning business. Nobody talked about the motel. Nobody talked about me. In the car on the way home, I asked Derek why he didn't say anything, why he let them humiliate me like that. He didn't even look at me. He just gripped the steering wheel and snapped, "What did you want me to say? It's a free property. Stop being ungrateful." I went silent. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just stared out the window and watched the streetlights pass. That night, I couldn't sleep. The kids were in bed, Derek was snoring, and I was lying there in the dark with my mind racing. Something didn't sit right, not the insult. I was used to those. It was the property itself. Something about it nagged at me the way a wrong number nags at a bookkeeper. So I did what I always do when something doesn't add up. I got out of bed, went to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and pulled up the county property records. I typed in the motel's address and hit search. What I saw made me sit up straight. The motel sat on 4.7 acres of land, and 3 months earlier, the county had rezoned that entire corridor for mixed-use commercial development. Retail, office space, restaurants. The land alone, not the building, not the rooms, just the dirt underneath it, was worth more than the beach house and the duplex combined. Gerald thought he gave me garbage. He gave me a gold mine, and he didn't even know it. Over the next few weeks, things got worse before they got better. I started reviewing our personal finances the way I reviewed accounts at work. Carefully, line by line. And that's when I found the transfers. Derek had been pulling money from our joint savings account and funneling it into his family's dry cleaning business. Not small amounts either. Thousands of dollars over the past year. He never told me. He never asked. When I confronted him about it one evening after the kids were asleep, he barely looked up from his phone. "It's family business, Corinne. You wouldn't understand. It's our savings account, Derek. Our money. My family built that business. You just count other people's money for a living." That was the moment I understood something clearly. I wasn't a partner in this marriage. I was a guest. And guests don't get a say. Then came Vanessa's housewarming party at the beach house. She invited 30 people, catered food, a bartender mixing cocktails on the deck overlooking the ocean. I showed up with the kids because Derek told me it would look bad if we didn't come. My daughter, Lily, was 7. My son, Noah, was 9. They were excited because they'd never seen the ocean from a house before. During the toast, Vanessa raised her glass and said, "I got the ocean view, and Corinne got the Roach Motel. But hey, at least she's got somewhere to send the kids when Derek finally upgrades." The room erupted in laughter. 30 people, some of them strangers, laughing at me. At my children's mother, I felt the heat crawl up my neck. I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't react. I just stood there holding my glass of water. Then Lily tugged on my sleeve. "Mom, why is Aunt Vanessa being mean?" I knelt down so I was eye level with her. I smoothed her hair and said, "She's not being mean, baby. She just doesn't know any better yet." But she was being mean, and she did know better. She just didn't care. The third betrayal came 2 weeks later. Gerald had decided he wanted the motel demolished. He called it an eyesore. He said it was dragging down the family name, so he told Derek to handle it. Derek came home one Tuesday night with a stack of legal papers and dropped them on the kitchen counter. "Just sign it, Corinne. Dad wants to clean up the property. It's worthless anyway." I picked up the papers. Transfer of ownership to the Bellingham Family Trust. I read every line. I already knew what they said before I finished the first page. "I need to think about it," I said. Derek's face went red. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Do you want to be part of this family or not?" I looked at the papers. I looked at him. I said nothing. He stormed out of the kitchen. The front door slammed so hard, the pictures on the wall shook. That night, after the house was quiet, I sat alone at the kitchen table. I pulled out my laptop. I'd been quietly researching for weeks by then. I'd already contacted the county planning office. I'd already spoken with a zoning specialist. I knew exactly what that land was worth. I knew developers had been circling that corridor for months, waiting for parcels to come on the market. I closed the laptop. I looked at the unsigned papers sitting on the counter. I didn't sign. What the Bellingham family didn't know was that I wasn't just a bookkeeper. I understood land value better than most real estate agents in the county. I'd been studying it for years. Quietly, at night, after the kids went to sleep and the house was dark and Derek was passed out in front of the television. While they laughed at me over dinner, I was reading zoning maps and development proposals. I took free online courses on property valuation and land use law. I read every county development plan published in the last 5 years, not because anyone told me to, because I wanted to understand how things really worked. My boss at the construction company noticed. She started letting me sit in on development meetings. She let me review project bids. She saw something in me that nobody in the Bellingham family ever bothered to look for. By the time Gerald handed me that motel, I already knew what the Route 9 corridor was about to become. I had already identified 3 commercial developers with active interest in that area. I made discreet phone calls. I asked the right questions. One developer in particular had expressed serious interest in the motel parcel. They didn't care about the building, they cared about the land. Gerald thought he was handing me a burden. Derek thought I'd just sign it away. Vanessa thought I was the punchline. But I had a plan none of them saw coming. And I wasn't going to say a word until the time was right. I started preparing. I hired a licensed appraiser to evaluate the property. I consulted with a real estate attorney who specialized in commercial land sales. And every single time Derek moved money out of our joint account, I documented it. Date, amount, destination. I kept records the way I keep all records. Clean, accurate, undeniable. The person who helped me see this through was Diane Travers, my boss. She was 57 years old, built her construction company from nothing, one truck and a small business loan. That was how she started. 20 years later, she had 40 employees and contracts across 3 counties. Diane was the kind of woman who didn't raise her voice, because she never had to. People listened to her because she was always right. One afternoon, she called me into her office. She closed the door. That was unusual. "I heard you asking about the Route 9 corridor," she said. "What's going on?" I hesitated. I'd never told anyone the full story. Not a friend, not a coworker, nobody. But something about the way Diane looked at me, patient, direct, no judgment, made me feel safe enough to talk. So I told her everything: the motel, the insults, the dinner, the laughter, the pressure to sign the property over, Derek's transfers, all of it. Diane listened without interrupting. When I finished, the room was quiet. The sound of the clock on her wall ticking was the only thing filling the silence. Then she leaned forward. "Corinne, that land is going to be worth a fortune within 18 months. Do not sign that paper. And let me introduce you to my attorney." Her attorney was a sharp real estate lawyer named Patricia Sims. Patricia reviewed the zoning records, the development plans, and the motel's deed. She confirmed what I already suspected. Once the rezoning was fully processed, the motel property could sell for $1.2 to $1.5 million, possibly more, if developed strategically. For the first time in years, I felt the ground steady under my feet. Meanwhile, the Bellinghams kept pushing. Gerald called me directly one evening. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "You're embarrassing, my son," he said. "Sign the property over. It's a rusted pile of nothing." Vanessa texted Derek constantly. "Your wife is being difficult. Handle her." And then Derek delivered his final ultimatum. He stood in the doorway of our bedroom, arms crossed, voice cold. "Sign by Friday, or I'm talking to a divorce lawyer." He thought that would break me. He thought the threat of divorce was the one thing I couldn't survive. But he didn't know that I'd already spoken to an attorney of my own. They set a deadline. Friday. They thought I'd crumble by then. But Friday was exactly the day I'd been waiting for, because that was the day the official appraisal report would be in my hands. Friday evening arrived. Gerald called a family meeting at his house. His words, not mine. A family meeting. Like it was some kind of corporate board session. When I pulled into the driveway, I could see all the lights on inside. Vanessa's car was already there. So was Derek's. He'd driven separately. Hadn't spoken to me in 2 days. I walked in carrying a single folder. The smell of Gerald's aftershave hit me the moment I stepped through the door. That heavy, expensive cologne he wore, like armor. The dining table was set up like a signing ceremony. Transfer documents in the center, a pen placed neatly beside them. Gerald sat at the head of the table. Vanessa was to his left, legs crossed, looking at her phone like this was already over. Derek stood near the window with his arms crossed. Gerald didn't waste time. "Corinne, we've been patient. Let's get this done. Sign the papers so we can move forward as a family." I set my folder on the edge of the table. I didn't sit down. "Before I sign anything," I said, "I'd like to share something with the family." Gerald raised an eyebrow. Vanessa looked up from her phone. Derek uncrossed his arms. I opened the folder. I pulled out the first document and placed it flat on the table where everyone could see it. It was the official county appraisal. "The motel you gave me," I said, "sits on 4.7 acres of land in a corridor that was rezoned for mixed-use commercial development 3 months ago. According to this independent appraisal, conducted by a licensed firm, not by me, That land is currently valued at $4 million. The room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that has weight to it. I could hear Gerald breathing. I continued. The beach house you gave Vanessa, appraised at $620,000. The duplex, $410,000. You gave me the most valuable property in your portfolio, Gerald, and you didn't even know it. Derek stood up fast. His chair scraped against the floor. That's not possible. That place is falling apart. I looked at him calmly. The motel is worthless. The land isn't. And because you put it in my name, just mine, it's legally my asset, not the family trust's. Not yours, Derek. Mine. I placed a second document on the table, a letter of intent from a commercial developer offering $1.35 million for the parcel. Vanessa's mouth opened. No sound came out. Then I placed a third document beside it. Bank statements. Transfer records. Every single unauthorized withdrawal Derek had made from our joint savings and sent into the family business. Dates. Amounts. Account numbers. And while we're sharing documents, I said, here's what Derek's been doing with our money. Gerald leaned forward, then leaned back. His face had gone from confident to pale in under 60 seconds. He cleared his throat. Now, Corinne, let's not be hasty. I'm not being hasty, Gerald. I'm being accurate. That's what bookkeepers do. I reached across the table and picked up the unsigned transfer papers. I held them up so everyone could see. Then I tore them in half, cleaned down the middle. I set both pieces back on the table. I won't be signing anything tonight, I said, but my attorney will be in touch about the divorce. I looked at Derek. He was standing there with his arms at his sides, his face blank, like his brain couldn't process what was happening. You told me to be grateful, I said. I am. You gave me my way out. I picked up my folder. I turned around. I walked out the front door. Nobody followed me. Nobody said a word. I filed for divorce the following week. My attorney, Patricia, used Derek's unauthorized transfers as leverage. The financial records I'd kept were clean, detailed, and impossible to dispute. The settlement was favorable. I retained full ownership of the motel property, every square inch of it. I sold the land to the developer for $1.38 million. After taxes and legal fees, I cleared just over $1 million. I bought a modest 3-bedroom house in a good school district. Nothing flashy, just safe and warm and ours. I set up college funds for Lily and Noah, and I started my own small property consulting firm, helping regular people understand what their land was really worth. People like my parents, people who never had anyone explain the numbers to them. Diane became my first business partner. She referred clients from her construction company. She believed in me before I fully believed in myself, and I will never forget that. The Bellingham family fractured. Gerald was furious, but mostly at himself. He couldn't admit it publicly, but he knew he'd handed away the most valuable thing he owned to the person he respected the least. Vanessa's beach house needed $90,000 in storm damage repairs that she couldn't afford. Derek, without me managing the household finances, fell behind on the mortgage, the car payments, everything. Turns out the man who told me I just count other people's money couldn't count his own. I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it online. I didn't call them. I didn't need to. My life spoke for itself. They handed me what they thought was nothing, but I'd spent my whole life learning how to find value where nobody else was looking. The difference between junk and treasure is knowing what you're holding. If someone in your family ever handed you the leftovers, the worst option, the thing nobody wanted because they thought you didn't deserve better, I want to hear about it. Subscribe and tell me your story in the comments. Sometimes the thing they throw away is the thing that sets you free. Click to help this story reach others who need it.